Hello and welcome to a new vlog and ship video in cooperation with ReiseJung. We're taking a look at the first 2 days of our cruise with the beautiful Swiss crown. We're starting in Huizen in the Netherlands and then we're going via Middelburg, Ghent, Antwerp, Maastricht, Roermond, Nijmegen, Zoons and Koblenz to Hanau. We're starting in Huizen on the Gooimeer and then we're going via the Makermeer and the Amsterdam Rhine Canal to the Lek Canal, the Lek, the Noord, Oude Maas, Deutsche Kiel, the Holland Steep to the Volkerak Lock. With this lock we are reaching the Volkerak and the Krammer Lock. After that we are reaching the Oosterschelde and the Zandkreek Lock, which brings us then to the Verzemeer, and from there we're reaching the lock of Veere and the Canal door Walcheren, which will bring us to our first stop in Middelburg. From Middelburg we are then heading to Vlissingen, crossing the Westerschelde, reaching the Canal Ghent-Terneuzen, which will then bring us to Ghent. But we're starting the video in Hanau, where the cruise started with a coach ride with a bistro coach of Gigabus from Hanau to Huizen. In the bus there was even a breakfast included, which was lovely. You will see it in a second. Here you can see the fantastic breakfast on board, which was included for our guests. And then we headed north, crossing the Wesel-Datteln Canal, which we will travel on in the next year, and finally reach Huizen close to Amsterdam. There was time to head aboard the beautiful Swiss crown, which I showed to you in my last video, and we can take a look at my cabin. Well, it's not exactly my cabin, I filmed this later on already in Hanau, but it shows one of the balcony cabins on the upper deck. Those are all identical. The main highlight of the cabin, of course, is the balcony. It's not a French balcony, but a proper balcony where you can step out and take a seat on the balcony, so you have a private outdoor area. This means that the cabin itself is a little bit smaller than the cabin on the middle deck, exactly by the size of the balcony of course, but it's still spacious enough and has a lot of features like power sockets next to the bed, coffee machine, mini bar, safe, big TV, wardrobe, comfortable bed of course. Maybe the only downside is that the space between the bed and the chair is a little bit limited. But otherwise it's a fantastic cabin and I really enjoyed the balcony. If you don't need the balcony, I would recommend taking a cabin on the middle deck. Also the bathroom is nice and spacious with a lot of storage, so it is a very beautiful cabin. And whilst we were checking out the cabins and started unpacking, the beautiful Swiss crown was already leaving Huizen, sailing on the Gooimeer. And after the safety information and the welcome cocktail, it was time for the first dinner on board. And as always with Skiller, the food was fantastic, very soft and tender meat, fantastic sauces, so it was fantastic. This was also an event cruise, as it was again a cooperation with the NOC Jazz Band of Hanau, and it was the first concert today in the lounge, but we decided to stay on the sun deck as the weather was fantastic and we were sailing on a beautiful river Lek, so we didn't want to miss the beautiful scenery, which I will now let you enjoy for a few moments. Later in the evening we were sailing past Schroonhoven, which is a very beautiful city. We already stopped there once and we will visit next year again. But then it was time to sleep, and on the next morning when we woke up we were already docked in Middelburg. Middelburg is a beautiful, charming city located on the Canal door Walcheren, close to the Dutch coast. The famous beach city of Domburg is nearby, and therefore Middelburg is also visited by a lot of tourists. I heard more people speaking German than people speaking Dutch today, as the weather was fantastic and there were already a lot of tourists here. Also, we decided to have a walk through the beautiful city. Some of our guests also joined a guided tour, a guided walking tour through this beautiful city. In the afternoon we had 2 more excursions. Part of our guests were going to Domburg to enjoy a beautiful afternoon at the beach, and some other guests were heading to Neeltje Jans, which is the excursion that I am joining, so we will see a bit more about Neeltje Jans in the next minutes. To get there, we have to take a bus for around 30 minutes through the beautiful scenery of the peninsula Walcheren, and then we are reaching the artificial island of Neeltje Jans. Neeltje Jans is part of the so-called Deltaworks, which is a series of construction projects that protects the inland of the Netherlands from flooding. It was constructed after a disastrous flood in 1953, which killed more than 1,800 people and more than 200,000 animals. And after this disaster, the Deltaworks were constructed. They consist of dams, storm surge barriers, and several other projects to make sure that such a disaster cannot repeat. Here we are crossing a dam which is cutting off the Verzemeer from the ocean, and here we are now reaching the Eastern Scheldt barrier. This is a storm surge barrier which only closes the Oosterschelde off from the ocean when a big flood is expected. During the construction, also the island of Neeltje Jans was built, and here on this island there is a visitor center which we are visiting now. Our tour started with a movie about the construction of the barrier, which was very impressive, but it was followed by the Delta experience, which is even more impressive, as we can see the catastrophic flooding in 1953 from the eyes of a 12-year-old. So that was very impressive, especially when they were showing the original pictures. So after this moving and touching presentation, we were then given some more explanations about how this project was done by our fantastic guide who had a lot of knowledge, and of course we could also take a look at the barriers themselves. It is very interesting how they were constructed, and explaining this would by far exceed the duration of this video, so I can highly recommend visiting Neeltje Jans and taking a look at all those explanations. It is very interesting. The barriers are also very impressive and interesting to see, and now we can of course also take a look at the barriers themselves. Can get pretty close to them, and of course now we have good weather, so they are open, and only when the weather is pretty bad they are closed down and cut off the Oosterschelde from the ocean to prevent it from flooding. After a very interesting afternoon, we're now taking the bus back to Middelburg, and on our way we are crossing the barriers again, at least a part of them, and we can clearly see that even though the barriers are open, there is a pretty heavy current and stream behind them, depending on the tide. Now there was a very strong current and water flow, which also shows how impressive the nature is here and how impressive also those Deltaworks are. So it was a very nice and interesting excursion, and now we're heading back to Middelburg. We're leaving Middelburg only late in the evening, so there was some time to head out into the city again. We decided to have a dinner outside of the ship. Usually we're doing this later on in the tour, but as there were not too many evenings where it would be possible to eat outside, and I also was hoping to get some mussels from the island Neeltje Jans, we decided to have dinner outside already on the second day. And actually I was lucky, I chose the right restaurant and got some mussels directly from Neeltje Jans, where I was just a couple of hours ago. Around 10 in the evening we were then leaving our docking location in Middelburg, continuing on to Ghent. To get there we have to cross the Canal door Walcheren, which is a pretty interesting canal. There are a lot of swing bridges and bascule bridges that we have to pass, so it is already one of the most spectacular parts of our cruise. And so we decided to stay on the sun deck, of course, and I will now let you enjoy this beautiful canal for a couple of moments. Later in the evening we were approaching the city of Vlissingen, and here we can see some mega yachts that were built here in Vlissingen. To be honest, I would have no use for such a yacht. I think it's pretty boring to be completely on your own on the ship, and even if I would take family and friends, I still can't figure out what I should do with all this space. I mean, this ship here, for example, is almost the size of a small cruise ship. But still, it was quite interesting to see. But even more interesting is the part that follows now as we're heading out on the Westerschelde. This river is also used by the biggest cargo ships in the world, and we can meet them here on the Westerschelde. We also saw some of the very big ships, but unfortunately it was already too dark outside to film them. In the next video we will be in Ghent in Belgium, and here you can see when this video will be uploaded, as well as the name of the song. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to comment, like, subscribe or share the video link, and I hope to see you in my next video, or maybe one day on board of one of our cruises. You can find some further information on that on reisejung.de.